When crude oil hits $100 a barrel, everyday life gets more expensive fast. Groceries, shipping, flights, deliveries. Almost overnight, the cost of everyday life starts climbing. And a lot of it traces back to one thing: oil. In a world racing toward electric cars, solar power, and cleaner energy, why is oil still so hard to replace? And what happens when a resource the modern world still depends on becomes harder, riskier, and more expensive to rely on? Before we answer that, you have to see how deep this dependence really goes. Because oil is not just what goes into your gas tank, it is woven into far more of modern life than most people realize. Just look at the numbers. In 2024, the world burned through more than 100 million barrels of oil every single day. The United States alone consumed roughly 1/5 of that, more than any other country on Earth. With just 4% of the world's population, it uses nearly 20% of the planet's oil. The US military alone uses as much oil as an entire mid-sized country, and when oil prices rise by just $10 a barrel, that can add another $1.3 billion to the Pentagon's costs. This is when you realize oil is not just a car thing. It is built into almost every part of modern life. And that brings us to the 4 big reasons the world still cannot quit it. The first reason is pretty simple. Oil is incredibly practical. Because crude oil is a liquid, it is easy to move, easy to store, and easy to use. You can pump it through pipelines, ship it across oceans, and load it straight into vehicles and machines without needing an entirely new system. That makes it hard to beat for transportation. It powers the cars and trucks on American highways, the delivery vans dropping packages at your door, the jets crossing the country, and the ships moving goods around the world. And one of oil's biggest advantages is flexibility. A single barrel of crude can be refined into different fuels for different jobs: gasoline for cars, diesel for trucks, jet fuel for airplanes, and heavy fuel for cargo ships. That is a huge reason oil remains so difficult to replace. It is not just one fuel, it is a whole family of fuels built for the systems the world already runs on. However, oil isn't just for driving. About 26% of all the oil we use goes into making, well, almost everything else. We're talking plastics, fertilizers, synthetic fabrics, and even the asphalt on your street. Think about your last trip to Walmart. That plastic water bottle in your hand? Oil. The polyester t-shirt you're wearing? Oil. The synthetic rubber tires on your car? Also oil. It's even in your smartphone screen and the foam inside your sofa. It's like the hidden ingredient in the recipe of modern life. Modern farming relies heavily on fertilizers made from fossil fuels to grow our food. So when oil prices spike, it sets off a domino effect. Farming, transport, and packaging all become more expensive, and suddenly your grocery bill jumps too. It's not just a car problem, it's an everything problem. The third reason is a big one. We've spent over a century building our entire world specifically to run on oil. It's like how every house is wired for the same type of light bulb. It's just the standard we've all agreed on. Since the early 1900s, the United States has laid down a massive web of hundreds of thousands of miles of pipelines. We've built some of the world's biggest refineries in Texas and Louisiana, with Texas alone home to over 35 refineries pumping out more than 6 million barrels a day. Then you've got the massive shipping hubs in Houston and Corpus Christi. So, the entire supply chain, from the trucks hauling your online orders across the country to the planes in the sky, was designed to work perfectly with oil. Tearing all of that down and starting over with a new technology wouldn't just cost trillions of dollars, it would take decades of work. We aren't just using oil, we're locked into it. And this right here is probably the most important reason of all. Oil packs a massive energy punch that today's alternatives just can't touch. Pound for pound, gasoline and diesel carry about 40 times more energy than a modern lithium-ion battery. To put that in perspective, just 77 pounds of gas can power a car for roughly 360 miles, about the distance from Chicago to Columbus, Ohio, A battery that same weight, it'll only get you about 21 miles. That's like the difference between a full-course steak dinner and a single grape. This is exactly why giant cargo ships, long-haul semi-trucks, and airplanes find it so hard to quit oil. It's also why heavy industries, the ones making steel, cement, or glass, still struggle to replace fossil fuels. They require scorching temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and burning fossil fuels is the easiest way to hit those numbers. According to the IEA, even if electric cars make up 40% of sales after 2035, global oil demand is still expected to climb to 113 million barrels a day by 2050. To really see how deeply oil still shapes modern life, it helps to look at the less obvious ways it operates behind the scenes. First, oil is built into far more of daily life than most people realize. The US Department of Energy says thousands of everyday products are made from petroleum, including everything from toothpaste to aspirin. In fact, if every single American stopped driving tomorrow, the US would still need 5 million barrels of oil every day, just to keep making the plastics, fertilizers, and medicines we can't live without. Then comes the part that surprises a lot of people: the oil paradox. If the United States is the world's largest oil producer, why does it still import so much oil? The answer comes down to the type of crude. Much of the oil produced from American shale is light crude, while many large US refineries, especially along the Gulf Coast, were built decades ago to process heavier crude from countries like Canada and Mexico. So, the US sells its premium light oil to the world and buys the cheaper heavy stuff to turn into your gas and diesel. There is also the hidden security cost. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, which means a single disruption there can send shockwaves through gas prices, shipping costs, and the wider economy. Keeping that system stable is not cheap. Some estimates have placed the US cost of protecting global oil routes and maintaining a military presence in key regions at anywhere from $81 billion to more than $150 billion a year. At the upper end, that is close to 1/5 of the entire defense budget. And current events are a reminder of how fragile that system still is. Despite all that spending, conflict involving Iran has still disrupted shipping through Hormuz and rattled energy markets. So part of the real cost of oil is the money spent trying to keep wars and regional conflicts from interrupting the flow of energy. So what does the future actually look like? Honestly, the jury is still out on exactly how much black gold is left in the ground. But one thing is crystal clear. Our massive dependence on oil has been the main trigger for economic roller coasters and global tension for decades. The problem is, while more and more machines, industries, and supply chains still rely on oil, it's not a resource that lasts forever. And that's a big reason the world has been slowly trying to move in a different direction. That means investing more in energy sources that don't run dry, like solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower. And this shift isn't just about cleaner energy. It's also about building a future that's less vulnerable to wild price spikes, global instability, and the kind of chain reaction that makes everyday life suddenly more expensive. Now I want to hear from you. What's the first thing in your life that gets more expensive when oil prices go up? Gas? Groceries? Shipping? Flights? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.